Hey people, I'm here to talk about Porgy and Bess. And I guess you could talk endlessly about Porgy and Bess, probably. But I'm going to focus in on a specific version of it. That being the 1976 Charles and Cleo Laine version, which is playing in the background. I love this music. I so love this music. And I was introduced to this music when I was a kid. Some of the tunes from here, especially Summertime, but also this, Bess You Is My Woman Now, and It Ain't Necessarily So. They're songs that were popularized by endless covers for many years since it originally appeared in 1935. It's based on a novel set in black ghetto of South Carolina, poor black folks. And from the time it appeared in 1935, I guess it's been controversial in a sense. Originally, I guess it was white folks who kind of turned their nose up at it. Gershwin was a Tin Pan Alley composer primarily, and here he is ambitiously producing an opera, but an opera set among, the underclass of American society. So that was one source of its rejection. And then later decades, it was black folks rejecting it because of its depiction by this Jewish man of black folks, attempting to represent them as very carnal. And I can see why that is a reason to be suspicious of it. But considering the kind of moral sexual conservatism of America, Gershwin and Ira Gershwin and DuBose Hayward going for that strength of desire. This is a play, an opera, a story very much about desire and lust, and this is one expression of that. So this tune represents the two principals, Ray Charles and Cleo Laine, doing this beautiful duet. I should say something about the versions of this opera. Apparently the 1935 original production had some edits, that it wasn't the full opera. I guess it was many, many years later before the full thing emerged. But what we have, and what we've had since 1935, are versions of it. The version I first became aware of was the film version, 1959. And back then, there weren't a whole lot of movies about black folks that weren't really small, low production products by black filmmakers, of which there were many. But this was one of the first times that major Hollywood studios took on producing an all-black cast in a film. So it stars like, Sidney Poitier, Dorothy Dandridge, Sammy Davis Jr. So it was a big thing, which was one reason black folks were drawn to it initially, although even then there was controversy. Apparently Poitier and Dandridge had some reluctance about this type of depiction of black folks, slum dwellers. Anyway, this version, this soundtrack version, was the one I first became aware of and loved it, and saw it way back then in the early 60s when I was probably 9 or 10, and I've never seen it since. Because once I was about to see it when I was in university, and apparently Black Student Society protested, and so it was withdrawn. I think that's what happened. But anyway, I've heard of it being screened here and there. I know it was at the Seattle Film Festival some years ago, but I've never been able to see it again. And I'd love to. But I grew up listening to the soundtrack. And then I am familiar with the Miles Davis instrumental version, which is gorgeous. And then, of course, there's the Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald version, which I regretfully have to admit that way late in life, before I gave that any attention, because, I grew up listening to them too as background music that wasn't my style of music. It was years. Basically what I'm saying is I was well into my adulthood before I really developed an appreciation for Louis Armstrong or Ella Fitzgerald. But in the meantime, I also grew up listening to Ray Charles. Always loved Ray Charles. I think the most soulful performer in the universe, in the known galaxy. And then in the early, mid 70s, I discovered Cleo Laine. I'd been hearing about her. Apparently her career up to that point had all been in England, where she's from, a product of a British mom and a Jamaican dad who she says was very musical. But I guess it was in 72, 73, whatever, she started making forays into the U.S. And I read some article about her, about how some consider her the greatest singer in the world, the greatest jazz singer. And I was way into people like Roberta Flack and Gladys Knight and Dionne Warwick. My mother was a singer, very much. She had a voice and a tone very much like Sarah Vaughan. So, despite what I just said about Ella, I loved female vocalists. So I got an album of Cleo Laine's that I really liked. I was debating between doing this video on that other Cleo Laine album, which is called I Am a Song, but I decided to go with this one to get the double punch of Ray Charles and Cleo together. So as soon as this came out, as soon as I heard of this album, I rushed out to buy it, because of my adoration of Ray Charles, and because of my new appreciation of Cleo Laine, and really curious about what the two would do together, because their styles are so different. So this is a real interesting result, putting these two together. I read somewhere that Ray Charles wanted Gladys Knight as his partner. And I can't help but think, oh my goodness, what an amazing pairing that would have been. Because Cleo comes from a whole different place. And so listening to this, it sounds like she's not as free as she might have been. Actually, in listening to her, my favorite cut by her is What You Want with Bess. Gorgeous piece. Too short, but she delivers it beautifully. But I realized that she really doesn't improvise at all. She's doing it note for note, pretty much like almost like the soundtrack version of it. She doesn't really play, although she's known for being an excellent scat singer, and I've heard excellent examples of that. She kind of sticks to the notes on the page, but her voice is pretty lively and dynamic, and so she manages to infuse life even to that type of reading of the lyrics. Now, one of the things about this album is you have Cleo tracks, you have Ray tracks, you have tracks of them together, and then you have instrumental tracks with just Ray Charles and a small combo. The other tracks are generally speaking backed by an orchestra, a pretty large orchestra. So you have all these different sounds. And in the instrumental track, you really get some just excellent musicianship, just keyboard work, excellent piano playing by Ray Charles. And he has some great people in the band backing him up. I'm not going to read the credits. You can find them. But I love this album. I've had it now for 50 years? I can hardly, well, not quite, almost. 79. This is 26. I love it. Ray's soulfulness, Cleo's husky, smoky, versatile voice. She has such a range, and there's some nice work on this album. You know, the Louis Armstrong, Ella Fitzgerald version is amazing. I'm not going to say that this one is better than that. It's very different than that one. And this music has been interpreted so many different ways. But this is a great album. I've always loved it. Never gotten tired of listening to it. Yes indeed. Ray Charles, Cleo Laine doing the great work of George and Ira Gershwin. This is a Norman Granz production, I should say. Norman Granz, just, a stellar producer. He did the Jazz at the Philharmonic series for so long. He did the Pablo label. He did Verve Records. A great producer of music. Well, he did the early Armstrong Fitzgerald version, and he says in the notes to this album, he figured he was done with Porgy Bess, but then many years later got the inspiration to do this, recruited Ray Charles, got him to go along with doing it with Cleo Laine. They couldn't work it out with Gladys Knight, apparently, and this is the result. So I love this album. Listen to it and love it. Great music. One great album. Thanks, folks. In addition to those production formats I already mentioned, there are also a couple of tunes featuring the James Cleveland Choir, gospel choir, in the background. I'm on my way. So this is the closing number, I'm on my way, with Ray Charles and the choir. So it's a great album. It's a double album. It comes in a box. There's this really nice insert with some great photos and some text kind of giving some of the background that I've shared with you. Ray Charles, everything he ever did was just dripping with soulfulness. I think you'll like it.